The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the small settlement nestled on the edge of a sprawling forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and a low hum of nature's pulse surrounded everything. It was a quiet day, almost too peaceful. Ethan, an average man living on the fringes of society, had always found solace in the isolation. He enjoyed his solitary walks, his small cabin, and the freedom that came with living away from the chaos of the world. But all that changed the day he found her. He had been walking back from the nearby lake when he spotted something unusual by the edge of the trees. At first, he thought it was an animal, perhaps a fox or a strange wild creature that had wandered too far from its den. But as he drew closer, he realized it was something far more human, though not entirely. A girl, barely more than a child, was curled up on the forest floor. She looked frail, almost skeletal, her small frame wrapped in tattered rags that barely covered her. Her skin was pale, streaked with dirt, and her hair, once likely a bright color, hung in matted clumps. Ethan's heart sank as he knelt beside her. Her eyes flickered open, but there was no recognition in them, only fear, hunger, and exhaustion. He had never seen a child like her before. She wasn't human in the way that most people understood, yet she wasn't exactly alien either. Her ears were slightly pointed, and her eyes, wide and golden, glowed faintly in the dimming light. Her features were sharp and animalistic, but there was something deeply tragic about her. She looked like she'd been through unimaginable pain. Her body was emaciated, and the most unsettling part of all was how she looked at him, as if she was waiting for him to harm her. For a moment, Ethan froze. Should he leave her? Could he leave her? His logical mind screamed to run, to ignore what was in front of him, to pretend he hadn't seen this creature. But something inside him resisted. This girl was in pain, and if he turned his back on her, he'd never forgive himself. "Hey, it's okay," he murmured, carefully placing his hand on her shoulder. His voice was soft, almost soothing. "I'm not going to hurt you." She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away. Her eyes were full of suspicion, yet there was also a flicker of hope, a flicker of desperation. Ethan knew he had to do something. He gently helped her sit up, then took off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders, the warmth of it comforting against her cold, trembling body. "You're safe now," he said, though he wasn't sure if she understood. "I'll help you." But the girl didn't respond. She was too weak, too far gone. She could barely hold herself upright. Ethan's mind raced. What could he do? What should he do? In the end, there was only one thing he could think of. He had to get her back to his cabin. The walk was slow and grueling, but eventually, Ethan managed to get her inside. He started a fire and began rummaging through his supplies, trying to find anything that could help her. Water, food, something, anything. He'd never been good at taking care of others. But this was different. This was life or death. He fed her a small amount of broth he had stored in his pantry and offered her some bread. She hesitated at first, eyeing the food as though unsure of what to do with it. But then, hunger took over. She devoured it with an intensity that was both heartbreaking and terrifying. Ethan had never seen anyone so desperate for food. After a few hours, the girl fell into a deep sleep on the small cot in the corner of his cabin. Ethan couldn't help but watch her. He wasn't sure what she was or where she came from, but he knew one thing for certain. Her life was fragile. She was an anomaly, something not meant to exist in the world as he knew it. But that night, as he sat alone by the fire, something stirred in the forest outside. It was faint at first, but unmistakable, a low growl, a deep rumble that sent shivers down his spine. It was the kind of sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Ethan stood up, his instincts on high alert. What was out there? The growl came again, louder this time. And then, A shadow passed by the window of his cabin, too large to be any animal Ethan had ever seen. It moved with an unnatural speed, and it was heading straight toward the door. Suddenly, the girl stirred in her sleep, tossing and turning. As if caught in some terrible nightmare, Ethan's heart raced. He didn't know what to do. Who was coming for her? What did they want? His instincts told him to grab the rifle, but his hand hesitated. He wasn't a fighter, he was a survivor. But the pounding at the door, the growling just beyond it, made him realize something. The girl wasn't just a victim. She was part of something much larger, something that had followed her into his life. And whatever it wasn't going to let him protect her without a fight. Ethan's hand tightened around the rifle, his knuckles white against the cold metal. The growl outside was no longer a distant echo. It was at the door now, close enough for him to feel the vibrations beneath his feet. His heart was pounding in. His chest, every instinct screaming that he wasn't prepared for what was about to unfold. The girl stirred again, her face scrunching in distress, as if she could sense the danger approaching. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to protect her, but he had no idea what he was up against. He had lived alone in the woods for years, but he'd never encountered anything like this before. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the sound of something large scraping against the wood of the cabin. Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. The door was old, and if whatever was out there was strong enough, it wouldn't take much to break through. He glanced at the girl, still unconscious on the cot. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale, but she hadn't yet fully awakened from her exhaustion. It was like she was trapped in a world of nightmares that she couldn't escape from. The door suddenly shuddered under the weight of a violent impact. Ethan stumbled back, his heart leaping into his throat. He could hear the cracking of wood, the unmistakable sound of something large and powerful trying to break through. A bead of sweat formed on his forehead, and he swore under his breath. With a deep breath, he moved toward the window, careful not to make a sound. He peered out into the darkness, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. His eyes scanned the night, but there was nothing, only shadows shifting in the wind. Yet the growl, that deep, rumbling growl, was still there, right outside. His cabin. It wasn't alone. Ethan's pulse quickened as another smaller growl joined the first. It was followed by a rustling sound. More of them? There were more of these creatures out there, lurking in the dark. And from the way they were acting, they weren't here for a friendly visit. His mind raced. Was it possible they were connected to the girl? Had she led them here? That was the most logical conclusion. But what did they want with her? Why had they followed her? Before he could come up with any more answers, the door burst open with a loud crash. Ethan swung the rifle up, his breath catching in his throat, as a massive creature stepped into the cabin. It was humanoid, but far from human. Its fur was dark and matted, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Its face was a twisted blend of animal and something else, something far older, far more dangerous. The thing stood in the doorway, its chest heaving as it let out a low, menacing growl. Ethan's body went cold. It was much taller than any man he had ever seen, its muscles bulging beneath its fur, as if it could tear through the cabin walls with ease. And then, behind it, Ethan saw her. The girl's mother. She was smaller, but her presence was just as unsettling. Her eyes glowed with the same eerie light, her face more fox-like than human. Her gaze locked onto Ethan, and he could see the hunger in her eyes, an ancient, insatiable hunger. There was no mistaking it. These were not creatures from the forest. They were something else entirely. Leave, the mother spoke, her voice low and gravelly, like it hadn't been used in years. It wasn't a plea, it was an order. Ethan froze. He didn't understand. Who were these beings? What did they want? The girl, still weak, still fragile, stirred on the cot, her eyes fluttering open as she took in the scene. She didn't seem frightened of her mother or the giant creature beside her. In fact, she looked relieved, as if the presence of these beings meant safety, meant home. The creature at the door took a step forward, its claws scraping against the wood floor. "She belongs to us," it growled, its voice like gravel being crushed beneath heavy boots. Ethan's mind whirled. She belongs to them? What did that mean? And what were they planning to do with her, or with him for that matter? His fingers tightened around the rifle. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want to hurt anyone. But if they were a threat to the girl, he wouldn't have a choice. The mother stepped into the cabin, her movements smooth and deliberate. "You've done well to care for her," she said, her voice softening for the first time. "But this place is not safe for her. We must leave now." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as he processed the words. They weren't here to hurt him. They wanted the girl back. But why? What was so important about her? Before he could respond, the girl finally sat up, her golden eyes locking onto her mother's. For a moment, the two stared at each other, and something passed between them, something powerful, something unspoken. Ethan took a step back, unsure of what to do. He didn't know if these creatures would attack, or if they'd just take the girl and leave. But he knew he couldn't stop them. They were too powerful, too far beyond anything he could fight. "I don't know what's going on," Ethan said quietly, his voice shaky. "But I'm not letting her go without answers. You owe me that much." The mother studied him for a long moment, her gaze cold and calculating. Then, without a word, she motioned for the creature behind her to step aside. Slowly it complied, moving to the side to give her space. "You wish for answers," she said at last. "Then listen well. The girl is not of this world. She is of our kind, and we have been searching for her. You were simply in the wrong place, at the wrong time, but we will explain everything. If you come with us." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The room was thick with tension, and Ethan knew there was no going back. Whatever he chose, his life would never be the same. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of the mother's words hanging over him like a dark cloud. The offer, or rather the ultimatum, hung in the air, thick with unspoken danger. He had lived a quiet life, and now, in a single evening, his world had been turned upside down. Everything he thought he knew, everything that had made sense, was now spiraling into something completely unrecognizable. He stared at the girl's mother, her eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. Behind her, the hulking creature remained, motionless, its predatory gaze never leaving Ethan. The room felt too small now, the walls pressing in with the weight of decisions yet to be made. Ethan wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What did she mean by our kind? Where did they come from? Why was the girl so important? And most importantly, what did they expect from him? But the words stuck in his throat. He was too afraid to speak, to ask the wrong thing and provoke their wrath. The girl, still weak but now fully awake, looked between her mother and Ethan, her golden eyes shimmering in the firelight. She seemed calm, almost resigned, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. But Ethan could sense something else, something buried deep within her expression, a hint of sorrow, of regret. "She's not like us," the girl whispered. Suddenly, her voice weak but clear. "I didn't want you to get involved." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. She didn't want him involved? What did that mean? Before he could process it, the girl's mother spoke again, her voice calm but with an edge of finality. "The girl has been hiding from her own kind, from her true nature," the mother explained. "For years she's been running, and now you found her." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had thought he was helping her. He had thought he was just offering a bit of kindness to someone who needed it. But now it felt as if he'd stepped into a far bigger world than he ever could have imagined. The mother's gaze softened, just slightly, as she looked at her daughter. There was a tenderness there, though it was faint. "She's our only hope." We've protected her for as long as we could, but she cannot live like this forever. She must embrace who she truly is. Who is she? Ethan finally found his voice, though it was strained, tight with confusion and fear. The girl turned her head slowly toward him, her gaze full of something unspoken. I don't know how to explain, she said quietly, but I'm not human. I'm Vulpine. The word hung between them, unfamiliar and strange, as if it held a weight of something ancient, something beyond Earth's understanding. Ethan's mind spun. Vulpine? The name sounded like something out of a fantasy book, not something a person would claim to be. Was she speaking metaphorically, or did she truly mean it? He wanted to ask more, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the mental toll this was taking on her. The mother's voice interrupted his thoughts. She's a child of our kind. Her bloodline is ancient, older than the stars. We've kept her safe from the enemies who wish to harness her power. We had to send her away when she was still young. Ethan blinked. Enemies? What power? The questions were tumbling out of him now, faster than he could process. Every answer raised more questions, and his mind couldn't keep up with the sheer scale of what was unfolding before him. The creature standing by the door, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark, let out a low growl. The mother raised a hand, silencing it instantly. She then turned back to Ethan. You do not understand, she said, her voice colder now. But you will. All will be revealed in time. But for now, the most important thing is that we cannot stay here. The enemies I speak of are too close. If they find us, they will take her. Ethan's stomach churned. He didn't know what to make of her words. He had lived his life without any thought of intergalactic war or ancient powers. But the truth was staring him in the face now, and it wasn't something he could simply ignore. The girl Vulpine was running from something. Something far worse than he had ever imagined. Then what do you need from me? Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. He had to ask. He couldn't just stand there helpless. The girl's mother took a step forward, her eyes narrowing. You will help us. You will keep her safe until we can reach the others. And you will not question the path we take. There is no time for hesitation. The moment you open your door to us, you open it to everything we carry. The words felt like a weight, heavy and suffocating. Ethan had no choice but to nod. He wasn't a fighter, and if these creatures, these Vulpine beings, were as powerful as they seemed, then what other choice did he have? He wasn't ready for war, but it seemed like war was already here, knocking at his door. The girl's mother turned to leave, motioning for Ethan to follow. But before she could step out, the girl looked up at Ethan, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely audible. I didn't want you to be caught in this. Ethan didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to ask why, to demand answers. But another part of him understood. She had never asked for this life. She hadn't chosen it. And now, in some twisted way, neither had he. He followed them out into the night, the cool air biting at his skin, and for the first time, the forest felt less like a sanctuary and more like a battlefield. The creatures that stalked the woods were no longer figments of myth. They were real, and they had arrived. And in that moment, Ethan realized that his life, the quiet existence he had built, was no longer his own. He had been thrust into something far greater than himself, and he could only hope that he had the strength to survive it. The moon hung high in the sky, a cold, watchful eye in the night. Ethan walked in the shadow of the two Vulpine creatures, the air thick with tension. The girl who had introduced herself as Lyra moved silently beside her mother. Her once fragile form now seemed somehow more purposeful, more grounded. The firelight in her eyes flickered with a mix of fear and determination. The mother led the way, her movements swift and confident, while the massive creature who seemed to serve as her silent protector followed closely behind, scanning the dark forest for any sign of movement. Ethan kept pace, though his mind was still reeling from the information he had just learned. The girl was Vulpine, a being from some unknown place, and now he had unknowingly become entangled in a cosmic struggle he couldn't begin to comprehend. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked quietly, though the question seemed almost absurd. What was he expecting? Directions to the nearest human town. The mother, who hadn't spoken much since they left the cabin, glanced back at him. "We're heading to a place of safety. You wouldn't understand its location. But trust me, it's our best chance to protect her." Ethan nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. How could he trust them? He had only met them a few hours ago. He had no idea what kind of enemies they were running from, and the more he thought about it, the more the whole situation felt like a nightmare spiraling out of control. But when he looked at Lyra, his resolve hardened. She had nowhere else to go, and as much as he had no idea what he was involved in, he wasn't about to abandon her. He had already made the decision when he brought her into his cabin, when he fed her and kept her safe. Now it seemed there was no turning back. The forest around them felt different now, darker. The trees loomed higher, their twisted branches reaching for the stars like skeletal arms. Ethan could hear every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig beneath their feet. And his senses were on high alert. The Vulpine mother seemed to have no such concern. She moved through the woods with ease, like she belonged to it, like she had been walking these same paths for centuries. "What exactly are you running from?" Ethan asked after a long silence. His voice was low, but there was an edge to it now, a need for answers. "And who are the enemies you mentioned?" The mother didn't answer immediately. She kept walking, her pace never faltering, as if the question hadn't registered. But then, after a long moment, she spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "In the wind, they are called the Tyrannic, and they are hunters, relentless, merciless. They have been searching for Lyra since the moment she was born." Ethan felt a chill settle in his bones at the mention of the name. Tyrannic. He had no idea who or what they were, but from the way she spoke, he could tell they were the stuff of nightmares. His mind raced with questions, but he didn't ask them. He was starting to realize that the more questions he asked, the less he would understand. Lyra's voice, faint but clear, broke the silence. "They aren't human," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They're something else. And they want to use me for something. Something bad." The mother cast a sharp glance back at her daughter, and Lyra fell silent. It was clear the subject was painful for her. Whatever the Tyrannic wanted from her, she wasn't ready to share. Ethan's thoughts churned. What could they possibly want with her? What did a young girl like Lyra have that would make an entire species of hunters chase her through the galaxy? Before he could ask more, the air around them seemed to shift. The temperature dropped, and a new sound echoed in the distance. It was a low, rhythmic thumping that made the hairs on the back of Ethan's neck stand up. The creatures were coming. Closer. The mother's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed, glowing faintly as she scanned the horizon. Lyra's body stiffened beside him, her eyes wide with fear. "They found us," the mother muttered, her voice tight with urgency. "Move quickly. We can't afford to be caught." Ethan's heart raced. He felt a surge of panic flood through him. Who were these creatures? Why had they come for Lyra? And why were they so determined to hunt her down? The mother gestured for him to follow. Without another word, she moved swiftly through the underbrush, her form melting into the shadows of the forest. Lyra, looking over her shoulder at Ethan, gave him a reassuring nod before she followed her mother. The thumping noise grew louder, closer now. It wasn't just one creature. There were many. The Tyrannic were on their trail, and they were closing in fast. Ethan's mind raced. He had no survival skills for this. His life had been quiet, peaceful, and filled with the mundane, a stark contrast to the chaos now unfolding around him. He had no idea how to escape these hunters, or even if there was an escape. All he knew was that he had to stay close to Lyra, He couldn't let them take her. The trees around them seemed to grow denser as they moved deeper into the forest. Ethan stumbled slightly, his foot catching on a root, but he quickly regained his balance. He could hear the creature's now heavy, deliberate steps, like something far larger than any man stalking through the woods. He reached out for Lyra, grabbing her arm gently to pull her ahead. "We need to keep moving," he urged, but she didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were wide with panic. "They're getting closer," she whispered. "They won't stop until they have me." Ethan's chest tightened. He glanced around frantically, searching for some sign of escape, but the forest seemed to close in around them. It was as if the trees themselves were holding them captive, blocking every path forward. And then, from the darkness of the forest, ahead, a figure emerged. It wasn't one of the Tyrannic. It was a man, a tall figure cloaked in shadow. His eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, and he moved with a fluid grace, like a predator stalking its prey. But there was something in his presence, something familiar, that made Ethan hesitate. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, his voice shaky but firm. He had no idea if this man was a friend or foe, but he had to know. The figure stopped, his gaze locking with Ethan's. His lips curled into a knowing smile. "I'm here to help," he said, his voice carrying a strange, eerie calm. "But you'll have to trust me if you want to survive the coming storm." Ethan's pulse quickened. Help? Who could he trust in this madness? But before he could speak, the forest seemed to shudder, and the thumping noise grew louder, closer. The Tyrannic were almost upon them. And now, with this new figure standing in their path, Ethan had no idea what his next move would be. The man stood before them, his form barely visible in the dark woods, but the unsettling glow in his eyes gave him an almost ethereal presence. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, like the forest itself was holding its breath. He had no idea who this man was, but there was something about him that felt out of place. Not just out of place in the forest, but out of place in the very fabric of reality itself. "I'm here to help," the man repeated, his voice smooth and unhurried. "But you need to trust me, now more than ever." Ethan glanced at Lyra, who stood beside him, her expression guarded, but not entirely fearful. She seemed to recognize him, and yet, there was something in her gaze that suggested uncertainty. She, too, appeared to be weighing her options. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, his grip tightening around the rifle. "Why are you here?" The man's smile never wavered, but there was something almost pitying in it. "I don't have time for explanations, not right now. The Tyrannic are closing in, and if you want to keep Lyra safe, you'll need to follow me." He motioned toward a narrow trail that disappeared into the dense trees. "Trust me, you don't want to be here when they arrive." The thumping sound grew louder, closer. Ethan felt the urgency in the man's voice, and despite the gnawing uncertainty in his gut, he knew they had no choice. The Tyrannic were coming, and he didn't have the luxury of questioning every stranger that crossed his path. "Not anymore. Lyra," he said, his voice low, "stay close." She didn't protest. She merely nodded, her golden eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and resolve. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had no idea what was going on, what he had gotten himself into, but there was no turning back now. They followed the man down the narrow trail, the thick underbrush, clawing at their legs. Every step seemed to bring the sounds of pursuit closer, the pounding footsteps of the Tyrannic reverberating through the trees. Ethan's breath came in short bursts, his mind racing. Who were these creatures? Why were they so intent on capturing Lyra? "I know you have questions," the man said without turning, as if he could hear Ethan's thoughts. "But answers will come in time. Just keep moving. If we stop, they'll catch us." They moved faster now, the weight of impending danger pushing them forward. The forest grew darker as they descended into a ravine, the trees narrowing to form a natural passageway that led deeper into the heart of the woods. Ethan could hear the rush of water below, a stream that ran through the ravine's base. The air grew colder, and the silence of the forest was replaced by the distant rumble of the Tyrannic's pursuit. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked, his voice strained as he struggled to keep up. The man glanced over his shoulder, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "To a place of safety. It's hidden unseen by their eyes." But not for long. As they made their way deeper into the ravine, the thumping sound began to fade, but Ethan didn't relax. He knew the Tyrannic weren't far behind, and every instinct screamed at him to keep moving. The path wound through thick underbrush, and the further they went, the more the forest seemed to shift. The trees became larger, older, their gnarled roots twisting above the ground like the fingers of some ancient being. The air felt heavier now, as though it was charged with an unseen energy. Ethan couldn't put his finger on it, but something about this place felt wrong. Not wrong in a threatening sense, but more like it was a place out of time, a place that didn't belong to the world he knew. Eventually, they arrived at a clearing, and the man halted. Lyra and Ethan came to a stop beside him, both panting, their breaths visible in the cold night air. The man looked around, his gaze scanning the surroundings, as though waiting for something. The moment stretched long and tense, and Ethan found himself wondering if they were really safe yet. And then, with a soft hum, the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift. Ethan's eyes widened as the earth parted in front of them, revealing a narrow entrance leading underground. It was as though the earth itself had opened up to swallow them whole, a hidden passage that had been concealed by the forest for centuries, if not longer. "This is where we'll be safe," the man said, stepping toward the opening. "Hurry. The Tyrannic won't give up easily." Ethan hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He turned to Lyra, who was standing motionless, her eyes fixed on the opening. There was a look in her eyes now, a quiet understanding that he didn't fully comprehend. She stepped forward without a word, her small form disappearing into the darkness below. Ethan followed, his mind spinning with questions. As they descended into the passage, the air grew warmer, but the sense of wrongness only deepened. The walls were smooth, almost unnaturally so, and the further they went, the more Ethan felt the weight of something ancient pressing down on them. It was as if they were walking through a forgotten part of the world, a place that had been lost to time. The man led them down the winding path, his footsteps sure and unhurried. Lyra moved silently beside him, her face a mask of quiet focus. Ethan felt the distance between them growing, like he was becoming more and more of an outsider in this strange new world they were entering. Eventually, they reached a large chamber, its high ceilings lost in the shadows above. The air here was thick with an ancient energy, and the walls were adorned with carvings that seemed to pulse with life. It was impossible to tell what they depicted, but they had a certain beauty to them, a beauty that was almost alien. The man finally turned to face Ethan and Lyra, his expression unreadable. "This is where the real journey begins," he said, his voice low and serious. "You're not just protecting her anymore. You're protecting all of us. And if the Tyrannic find us here, everything will be lost." Ethan swallowed hard. His mind was swimming with the gravity of the situation, but one thing was clear. The danger was only beginning. They had no idea what the Tyrannic were capable of, but one thing was certain: whatever war was coming, Ethan had just been thrust into the heart of it. The chamber was cold. Its vastness swallowed the sound of footsteps, and the dim, flickering light from a few scattered orbs of energy seemed to push the darkness back only marginally. Ethan stood at the entrance, his breath coming fast, the urgency of the chase still fresh in his mind. He had never felt so far from the life he knew, and every step deeper into this underground place made him feel even more alien to it. The walls, covered in intricate carvings, pulsed faintly, their lines shimmering as if alive, as though they held memories of a time long past. Lyra stood still beside the man, her golden eyes focused on the ground, lost in thought. Her mother, who had led them this far, had not said a word since they entered the hidden chamber. The silence weighed heavily on Ethan. His mind buzzed with unanswered questions, none of which seemed to have simple answers. The man, however, seemed completely at ease, unfazed by the mystery of their surroundings. He turned to face Ethan, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "We have a lot to discuss," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "But now is not the time. The Tyrannic will not rest until they find us. They are relentless hunters, and the moment we stop moving, they will know." Ethan looked back toward the path they'd come down, his chest tightening. The thought of the Tyrannic, the merciless hunters, still lurked in his mind, sending waves of panic through him. His mind swirled with all the questions he'd been holding back. What are the Tyrannic, and what do they want with Lyra? His voice was hoarse, his throat dry from the tension that had been building since they were first attacked. The man's gaze darkened, his features tightening, as though the question itself was a reminder of something painful. He didn't answer. Immediately, his eyes flicking toward Lyra for a brief moment, as if weighing something in his mind. "They are not from your world," the man said after a long pause. "They are an ancient species, older than your stars. They have evolved to be the perfect hunters, relentless, calculating, and merciless. They were once rulers of their own kind, but their empire fell long ago. Now they seek to conquer again, only. Now they are hunting something more dangerous than a planet. They are hunting her." Ethan's heart sank. "Lyra?" His eyes flicked to her, and she met his gaze, but this time there was something different about her expression. It wasn't fear. It was resignation, and it shook Ethan to his core. "Why?" he whispered, feeling the weight of the question press against his chest. "Why do they want you?" The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Lyra swallowed hard, her eyes not leaving Ethan's, as if she was gathering the strength to say something that had been kept hidden for a long time. "Because I am not just a girl," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am the last of my kind. I carry something inside me, a power. A power they want to control. I was born from an ancient bloodline, one that could either bring great destruction or great healing, depending on who wields it." Ethan blinked, the weight of her words crashing down on him. He had always thought she was just a girl who had been starving in the woods and had needed help. Now he was learning that she was far more than that. The implications were overwhelming, and it was hard to wrap his mind around them. Man spoke again, his tone flat. "The power she holds inside her is a weapon, a gift, or a curse, depending on who controls it. The Tyrannic are looking for her because they believe they can use her abilities to restore their empire, to reclaim what they lost. But they don't understand what it truly means to control such power. If they succeed, the balance of the universe will tip in their favor and everyone else will suffer." Ethan's stomach churned. He could barely comprehend what was happening, but one thing was painfully clear. Lyra wasn't just a girl he had found in the woods. She was the key to something far greater, and now he was caught up in the struggle over that power. "They will stop at nothing," the man continued, his voice low and ominous. "If they catch her, they will use her, and the consequences of that will be catastrophic." Ethan's thoughts were racing. He had no idea how to protect her, how to fight these tyrannic creatures, or even how to help her control whatever power she held. But one thing was certain. He wouldn't let them have her. Not after everything he'd already seen. "Is there any way to stop them?" Ethan asked, his voice cracking with the weight of his own helplessness. Man's gaze flickered toward Lyra, his eyes filled with a silent understanding. "You can't stop them alone," he said. "None of us can. But you can help her. She must embrace her true nature. She must learn to control the power she has before they do." Lyra shifted, her expression guarded, as if his words made her uneasy. "I don't know how," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I don't even know what it is power I have." The man stepped forward, his presence almost overwhelming. "You'll learn, but not here, not yet." Suddenly, there was a sound distant but unmistakable. The low, guttural growl of something enormous. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The Tyrannic. "They had found them. They're here," the man said calmly. "Get ready." Without another word, he moved swiftly toward the far side of the chamber, his hand reaching out to touch one of the carvings on the wall. The symbols began to glow as his fingers traced them, and a deep hum filled the air. The floor beneath them trembled, and for a moment, the entire chamber seemed to shift, as if the very ground was alive with energy. "We need to move," the man said urgently. "Follow me and keep close. We'll be safe for a while, but we can't stay here long. The Tyrannic will not rest. And neither can you." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His heart was hammering in his chest, and he could feel the pull of something far larger than himself. He had known this was coming. The Tyrannic had tracked them here, and now it was a matter of survival. As the man led them deeper into the glowing chamber, the walls pulsing with life, Ethan looked at Lyra one last time. She was no longer just a frightened girl. She was the last hope of an ancient people. The weight of that truth sat heavily on his shoulders. Whatever came next, Ethan knew he had to stay by her side. They didn't just have enemies to fight, they had to uncover the power hidden within her before. It was too late. But as the ground rumbled and the Tyrannic's growls echoed closer, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The chamber seemed to grow even darker as the distant rumble of the Tyrannic's approach grew louder. The walls vibrated with the energy of the ancient carvings, glowing faintly as if they were alive, responding to the encroaching threat. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his mind still trying to process everything. The Tyrannic were closing in, but there was no time to process what was happening. He had to move. He had to protect Lyra, the man, whose identity and intentions remained as enigmatic as ever, hurried toward a stone archway on the far side of the chamber. The glowing symbols on the walls intensified, lighting the path ahead, guiding them deeper into the underground complex. Lyra followed without hesitation, but Ethan lingered for a moment, his thoughts scattered. Was there really any hope of defeating the Tyrannic? And what exactly was Lyra becoming? He turned to her, his voice tight with urgency. "Lyra, we need to stay close. You have to tell me what's going on, what we can do. What can we do to stop them?" Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes filled with a depth of emotion he hadn't seen before. There was fear, yes, but there was also something else, something powerful. A quiet strength, something ancient and potent that was beginning to stir within her. "I don't know if we can stop them, Ethan," she said, her voice strained. "But I can't keep running forever. They'll find me, no matter where I go. I have to face them. I have to learn to control this power inside me." Ethan took a step closer, his hand resting on her arm. "We'll face them together. We'll figure it out, whatever it takes." Lyra nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. Her hand, trembling slightly, reached out and grasped his. "I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want anyone to suffer because of me." But before Ethan could respond, the man turned, his expression grim. "You don't have a choice anymore. The Tyrannic are close. You'll have to face them whether you're ready or not. The only question is whether you'll control your power or let them control you." Ethan could feel the pressure building. The Tyrannic's growls were closer now, echoing off the walls, each one more menacing than the last. He glanced over his shoulder, the sound of their pursuit vibrating through the earth beneath his feet. His thoughts raced, but there was no time for second-guessing. They had to keep moving. The man led them through the archway and into a narrow, winding passage that twisted downward. The walls here were made of smooth stone, with strange, intricate patterns carved into them. It felt like they were descending into the very heart of the earth. Ethan's instincts screamed that they were walking deeper into something ancient, something hidden for a reason. The passage grew colder the further they went, and the air grew thick with an energy he couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the air that felt strange, though. It was as though the ground beneath his feet was vibrating with a pulse, an ancient rhythm that seemed to resonate in his bones. "We're getting close," the man said, glancing over his shoulder. "Stay alert." The moment they reached the end of the passage, they came to a vast underground cavern. The ceiling was so high it was lost in the shadows, and the cavern was filled with strange glowing crystals that hummed with energy. The entire space was alive, a heart of some forgotten world. The power here was palpable, and Ethan felt it press against him like an invisible weight. "This is where we make our stand," the man said, his voice filled with purpose. He turned to Lyra. "Now we need you to unlock the power within you. You are the key." Lyra took a deep breath, her hand tightening around Ethan's. She looked up at him, her eyes full of something deeper, now a realization. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a force of nature, a weapon that could tip the balance of everything. "I don't know how," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I have to try." Ethan stood by her side, trying to steady her. "You don't have to do it alone." Her gaze shifted from him to the man, and then she nodded. The moment of silence was shattered by a distant roar, a sound that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. The Tyrannic were here. They had finally arrived. Suddenly, the cavern trembled, the ground shaking violently as the entrance to the chamber filled with a cold, oppressive darkness. The Tyrannic were there, and they were relentless. The air grew thick with tension, and Ethan could feel it in the pit of his stomach. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. Man stepped forward, raising his hand to the center of the cavern. The air shimmered, and the symbols carved into the stone floor began to glow with a fierce intensity. "Lyra," he said, his voice sharp and commanding. "Now, focus your power. You are not just a weapon. You are a force of nature, the last of your kind. You can shape the world around you. You can reshape the very fabric of reality." Lyra's eyes closed, and she took a deep, steadying breath. Ethan could see the struggle in her expression, the tension that ran through her like a live wire. She was trying, so desperately trying, to unlock the power that had been dormant inside her all this time. The ground beneath them rumbled, and Ethan felt a strange, almost electric energy build around them. The Tyrannic's footsteps were unmistakable. Now they were near, so near. In the silence that followed, Lyra's voice broke through. "I can feel it. The power. It's alive." And then, it happened. A burst of energy exploded from her, a wave of blinding light that filled the cavern, and then erupted outward like a shock wave. The Tyrannic, who had just entered the chamber, were caught in the blast. Their roars of fury and confusion filled the air as the light enveloped them. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, everything went silent. Ethan couldn't believe his eyes. The power Lyra had unleashed was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was pure, raw, and it felt like the very air around them had been reshaped by it. He looked over at her, wide-eyed, and saw that her form was glowing, her energy pulsing like a living thing. But the Tyrannic weren't defeated. They were stunned, disoriented, but they were still standing. And their leader, tall and imposing, took a step forward, his voice booming through the cavern. "You think you can hide from us? You think you can stop us?" he sneered. "You are nothing." Ethan's heart thudded painfully in his chest. But Lyra was no longer the frightened girl he had found in the woods. She was something far more powerful. Her golden eyes met the Tyrannic leaders, and she spoke, her voice filled with an intensity that shook the very air around them. "No, I am everything." With that, she raised her hand, and the ground beneath them responded. The tyrannic leader's roar was cut short as the very earth beneath him cracked open, pulling him down into the deep, dark abyss of the cavern. The rest of the tyrannic scattered, disoriented and terrified, but it was clear that they had been defeated. For now, Lyra fell to her knees, her strength spent. Ethan rushed to her side, his heart in his throat. "Lyra, you did it." She looked up at him, her golden eyes dimming with exhaustion. "We did it," she whispered. The cavern was still. The tyrannic were gone. And for the first time since all of this began, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. They had won for now, but as the echoes of the battle faded, one thing was certain. Their fight had only just begun. The world had changed, and Lyra's journey was far from over. But whatever came next, Ethan knew one thing for sure: he would stand by her side. Together, they had faced the impossible. And together, they would face whatever came next.